A millionaire bride sneered at her groom's simple family until they showed up at the wedding and revealed their true status. The air in the bridal suite was thick with the scent of roses and expensive perfume. Olivia Sterling sat in front of a massive, gold-framed mirror while a team of stylists fussed over her. Her wedding gown, a custom-made designer piece adorned with intricate pearls, shimmered under the chandelier's glow. Despite the grandeur surrounding her, Olivia's face was set in a deep scowl. She turned sharply toward her mother, Eleanor Sterling, who was seated elegantly on a velvet chair, sipping champagne. Beside her, Olivia's maid of honor, Victoria, adjusted her diamond bracelet, her expression amused but slightly nervous. "I can't believe I have to deal with this today," Olivia huffed, her manicured nails tapping impatiently against the vanity table. "Mother, have you seen William's family?" There, she waved her hand dismissively. So simple. Eleanor raised an eyebrow but said nothing, waiting for her daughter to continue. "They're from some tiny town in the middle of nowhere," Olivia went on, her tone dripping with disdain. "I bet they don't even know which fork to use at dinner. And their clothes, God, what if they show up in something outdated and embarrassing?" Victoria giggled. "Well, sweetheart, they're not exactly sterling material, are they?" Olivia smirked. "That's putting it lightly." Her mother finally set down her glass and sighed. "Olivia, we don't get to choose our in-laws. But at least you chose the right groom." Olivia rolled her eyes. "Did I, though? I mean, William is handsome and charming, but his family, it's like marrying into mediocrity." Eleanor didn't argue. She simply smoothed the fabric of her elegant dress and glanced at her daughter. "Just smile through it. The wedding is about you, not them." A knock at the door interrupted them. "5 minutes, Miss Sterling." Olivia took a deep breath and forced a dazzling smile onto her face. "Let's get this over with." The grand ballroom of the Sterling estate was transformed into a scene from a royal fantasy. A towering crystal chandelier bathed the room in golden light, reflecting off the walls lined with white roses and gold filigree. Rows of elegantly dressed guests murmured amongst themselves, sipping champagne as they awaited the ceremony. This was a wedding for the elite, CEOs, politicians, celebrities. Every detail, from the imported silk tablecloths to the live orchestra flown in from Italy, was meticulously curated to exude wealth and sophistication. As Olivia stepped into the aisle, all eyes turned to her. She soaked in the admiration, her smile radiant. This was the moment she had dreamed of, an event worthy of her status. Then, the doors at the back of the ballroom opened again. William's family entered. The contrast was striking. While Olivia's guests were adorned in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, William's parents and younger sister were dressed in simple, elegant but clearly modest attire. His mother wore a navy blue dress, plain, compared to the bejeweled gowns surrounding her. His father wore a well-fitted suit, but it lacked the luxury branding that Olivia's father's custom Italian ensemble boasted. His sister, Lily, in a pastel dress, looked fresh-faced and graceful, but nowhere near the extravagance of the other guests. A murmur rippled through the room. Olivia's grip on her bouquet tightened. She stole a glance at her mother, who subtly raised an eyebrow. No words were exchanged, but the message was clear. Olivia turned back toward the altar, her smile never faltering, though her stomach twisted with embarrassment. William, ever the gentleman, beamed as his family approached. He stepped forward, hugging his mother and shaking his father's hand. "Mom, Dad, Lily, you look great." His mother smiled warmly. "We wouldn't miss this for the world, sweetheart." Lily grinned. "You look amazing, William." Olivia forced herself to step closer. William turned, his eyes bright with love. "Olivia, you remember my parents, Thomas and Margaret, and my sister Lily." She plastered on a smile. "Of course. Lovely to see you again." Margaret extended a hand. "You look beautiful, dear?" Olivia hesitated for half a second before taking it, her grip fleeting and cold. "Thank you." She glanced at Victoria, who smirked knowingly. Then Olivia turned back to William, and in a hushed whisper only her maid of honor could hear, muttered through clenched teeth, "I can't believe this. William looks so polished, so perfect, and his family? God, what an embarrassment." The reception was a spectacle of luxury, held in a glass-domed ballroom overlooking the estate's sprawling gardens. The chandeliers above cast a golden glow over the elegantly decorated tables, each adorned with crystal vases filled with imported orchids. Soft classical music played in the background, mingling with the hum of conversation. Yet, despite the perfection of the setting, a subtle tension wove through the air. Guests had begun to take notice. The contrast between Olivia's side and William's was stark. While Olivia's guests were clad in designer gowns and bespoke suits, draped in diamonds and exuding wealth, William's family sat together, their attire modest but refined. It wasn't that they were poorly dressed, on the contrary, they carried themselves with quiet dignity. But to Olivia's elite circle, they stood out like a sore thumb. At one table, a woman in a sequined gown leaned toward her husband and whispered, "Are they really William's family? I thought he was a professor at a private college, not whatever this is." At another table, a young socialite laughed softly. They looked like they walked into the wrong wedding. The comments spread like wildfire. Olivia could hear them, feel them. She saw the subtle glances cast toward her, the barely concealed smirks, the knowing looks exchanged. Her cheeks burned. Duh. She couldn't take it anymore. Rising abruptly from her chair, she turned to William, her voice low but sharp. "We need to talk. Now." William blinked in surprise. Olivia were in the middle of dinner. She didn't care. Grabbing his wrist, she pulled him from the head table, weaving through the guests until they reached a quieter corner near the grand staircase. She spun to face him, arms crossed. "William, what were you thinking?" His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" She let out an exasperated sigh. "Your family. Why didn't you tell them to dress appropriately?" William's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "Olivia, they did dress appropriately. This is a wedding, not a fashion show." Her eyes flashed. "Are you kidding me?" "Look around, William. Do you see what people are saying? My guests are whispering about them. About me. I wanted a perfect wedding, and now people are laughing at us." William took a deep breath, his jaw tightening. "Laughing at us? Or at you?" She threw up her hands. "Does it matter? God, William, I thought you understood how important today is for me." His gaze darkened. "And I thought you understood how important my family is to me." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The distant murmur of the reception buzzed around them, but it felt like they stood in their own bubble of tension. William's voice softened, though there was an unmistakable edge of hurt beneath it. "Olivia, they tried their best. They spent weeks picking out their outfits. My mom wanted to make sure she looked nice. My dad even bought a new suit for today. They came here because they love me and want to support us. Did you even notice that?" She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. William exhaled slowly. "You didn't, did you?" Olivia crossed her arms tighter, unwilling to back down. I don't understand why they didn't try harder. This isn't some backyard wedding, William. This is the wedding of the year. And they look out of place." William stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Something in his chest ached. He had always known Olivia came from a different world, one of wealth, of status, of expectations. He had accepted that, but standing here, looking at her now, he realized something else. She hadn't accepted him. Not fully. Not his background. Not his family. Not the people who had shaped him into the man she claimed to love. A cold realization settled over him. "Maybe," he said quietly, "it's not them who are out of place." Olivia's breath caught. "What is that supposed to mean?" William didn't answer right away. His eyes searched hers, as if trying to find something, anything, that would make this make sense. But all he saw was disappointment. Not in the wedding, not in the guests, but in her. Without another word, he turned and walked back toward the reception, leaving Olivia standing alone, her fingers trembling around the delicate lace of her gown. Margaret Carter sat with her husband, Thomas, and their daughter, Lily, at one of the side tables of the grand reception hall. The elegant surroundings, the glittering chandeliers, the perfectly arranged floral centerpieces, it was all breathtaking, but Margaret couldn't shake the tightness in her chest. She had been so proud of her son today. William had always been kind, intelligent, and full of integrity. Seeing him standing at the altar, marrying the woman he loved, should have been one of the happiest moments of her life. But the whispers, the stares, the barely concealed smirks, she wasn't deaf to them. And worse, she had overheard part of Olivia and William's heated conversation. Maybe it's not them who are out of place. William's words had echoed in her mind ever since. She turned to her husband, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thomas, maybe we shouldn't have come." Her husband's face, strong and lined with years of wisdom, softened. He reached for her hand under the table. "Margaret, we came to support our son. But look at how we're being treated." She glanced around. "Look at how Olivia sees us. Lily, sitting across from them, tensed. She had always been fiercely protective of William, and it pained her to see her mother like this. "She's just caught up in the wedding chaos," Lily offered, though there was little conviction in her tone. "William loves her. I don't want to be the reason today is ruined for him." Margaret smiled sadly at her daughter. "Oh, sweetheart, you've always had such a kind heart." Before Thomas could say anything, a sharp laugh came from the next table over. A middle-aged woman in a floor-length gown, diamonds glinting around her neck, leaned toward her husband. "I heard they're from some tiny town upstate," she said, her voice carrying just enough for those nearby to hear. "Can you imagine? A schoolteacher's salary, how do they even afford to be here?" The man beside her chuckled, swirling the wine in his glass. "Maybe the groom's family is here on scholarship." A few of their companions laughed softly, their perfectly white teeth flashing under the dimmed reception lights. Margaret stiffened. Thomas's grip on her hand tightened slightly, a silent warning to stay calm. Lily, however, wasn't as composed. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palm. She had spent her whole life watching her parents work hard, build a loving home, and raise 2 children with values that couldn't be bought. And now they were being mocked, reduced to their financial standing, as if that was the only thing that mattered. She opened her mouth, ready to snap back, but before she could, Olivia's voice cut through the tension. Except she wasn't defending them. She was laughing. Not loudly, not cruelly, but enough. Enough to show she wasn't offended. Enough to show she wasn't on their side. Lily felt her stomach drop. Margaret saw it too. Her heart ached, not for herself, but for William. She reached for her husband's hand once more, her fingers light but firm. "Thomas," she murmured, her eyes steady. He turned to her, sensing something in her tone. She smiled, not a smile of amusement, but one of quiet understanding. "Let's just wait and see," she said softly. Thomas studied his wife for a moment before nodding. And so, they waited. The clinking of a spoon against a crystal glass rang through the grand ballroom, signaling a moment of formality. The hum of conversation faded as the wedding's host, a distinguished-looking man in an impeccable tuxedo, took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began with a practiced smile, "it is now time for a few words from the families of our lovely bride and groom." Olivia's grip on her champagne flute tightened slightly. Her heart pounded. "Please," she thought, "don't let them embarrass me." She forced a smile, shifting in her seat as her father, Richard Sterling, rose first. He was a man of power and presence, a real estate mogul whose name alone commanded respect. With ease, he spoke about Olivia's upbringing, her grace, her ambition, her future. He made subtle jabs about how William was lucky to have been chosen by such a remarkable woman. The crowd chuckled knowingly. Olivia exhaled in relief. Perfect. Then, the host turned toward William's family table. "And now, we'd love to hear from the groom's parents." Olivia's stomach twisted. This was it. She prayed that William's mother would decline. She could already picture it, Margaret fumbling over her words, speaking in that small-town way that would make their elite guests exchange smirks behind their champagne flutes. But to her horror, Thomas Carter, William's father, stood up. A murmur rippled through the room. Olivia's fingers curled into the fabric of her dress. Thomas walked to the microphone with an air of quiet confidence. He didn't have the sleek arrogance of the wealthy, nor the nervousness of someone who felt out of place. Instead, he carried himself with the ease of a man who knew exactly who he was. When he spoke, his voice was steady, rich with warmth and wisdom. "My name is Thomas Carter," he said, looking out at the room. "And my wife, Margaret, and I are not only here today as the proud parents of William Carter." Something in his tone made a few guests sit up straighter. There was a shift, a change in energy. "Ah." A few whispers began to weave through the crowd. Olivia stiffened. Why did it suddenly feel like something was happening? At one of the VIP tables, a man in his 60s, dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, narrowed his eyes as he studied Thomas. He leaned toward the man beside him, his voice urgent. "Wait a second," his fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "That's..." He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening. A sudden hush fell over the table. The businessman turned sharply to another guest. "Is that who I think it is?" The other man, now equally alert, adjusted his tie, glancing toward Thomas with newfound recognition. A ripple of realization was beginning to spread across the room, and Olivia, still sitting at the head table, felt a strange chill crawl up her spine. Something was wrong. Or worse, something was about to change. The ballroom was no longer filled with light-hearted chatter. Instead, a tense anticipation thickened the air as guests exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued. The businessman in the navy blue suit stood abruptly, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Wait, Thomas Carter." His eyes flickered with disbelief as he stared at William's father. "You're not just a retired teacher." Olivia's brows furrowed. What was he talking about? Thomas, still standing at the microphone, gave a small, knowing smile. He tilted his head slightly, as if waiting for the realization to settle in. The businessman turned to the guests at his table. "This man is one of the most successful real estate investors in the country. He owns half the commercial properties in downtown Chicago." A collective gasp swept through the room. Whispers turned into a wave of exclamations. "No way. Thomas Carter? The same Carter who built the Greenfield Towers? I thought he was just a school teacher." Olivia's breath hitched. She turned sharply to her mother, whose composed expression had shattered into one of pure shock. Eleanor Sterling, a woman who prided herself on knowing every influential name in high society, was visibly unsettled. She had done background checks, had her people dig into William's family. How could she have missed this? Thomas chuckled softly, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Yes, I did spend many years as a teacher, but real estate was always a passion of mine. Over the years, Margaret and I invested in properties, building a portfolio that now spans across several states." Another stunned silence. Then a woman near the front gasped, Margaret Carter?" Her voice wavered with disbelief. "The same Margaret Carter who started the Horizon Foundation." Margaret, still seated, smiled warmly. "That's me." At this, even more guests erupted into murmurs. The Horizon Foundation was one of the most renowned charities in the country, known for its work with underprivileged children, providing education and housing for thousands. Eleanor's grip tightened on her champagne flute. This woman, this supposedly simple woman, was responsible for a foundation that had received praise from some of the wealthiest philanthropists in the world. Olivia felt as if the floor had been ripped from beneath her. And then, as if the final blow hadn't yet landed, another guest gasped. "The daughter, Lily Carter, isn't she?" Before they could finish, a man in a sleek black suit, who had been scrolling through his phone in disbelief, lifted his head. "She's the CEO of Nexus Tech," he announced, his voice carrying over the stunned crowd. Now, it was complete chaos. Nexus Tech was one of the fastest-growing AI startups in the country, already valued in the billions. Lily Carter, the quiet, seemingly ordinary young woman sitting at the Carter family's table, was its founder. Olivia whipped her head toward William's sister. Lily sat calmly, watching the scene unfold with a small, knowing smile. Unlike Olivia, she had never felt the need to prove herself with status. She had let people assume what they wanted. And now, the truth had spoken for itself. At the head table, Olivia's entire body had gone cold. Her heart pounded painfully against her ribs as her mind scrambled to process what had just happened. She had spent the entire night looking down on William's family, dismissing them, mocking them in whispers. And now? Now she realized the truth. They weren't beneath her. They were above her. Her hands trembled slightly as she stared at William's parents, people she had deemed unworthy. At Lily, the small-town girl who was actually a tech powerhouse. She had thought marrying William was a step down in status. But in reality, she had been the one out of her depth. She swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. Beside her, Eleanor Sterling sat frozen, her perfect facade cracking. For the first time in a very long time, perhaps ever, Olivia Sterling had nothing to say. The air in the grand ballroom was thick with disbelief. The whispers had turned into open murmurs, and then into quiet laughter. Laughter not of amusement, but of irony. At one of the elegantly decorated tables, a young woman leaned toward her companion, her voice barely containing her glee. She spent the whole night looking down on them, and now it turns out they're richer than her family. Another guest chuckled. Unbelievable. She thought she was marrying beneath her, but she was the one reaching up. Across the room, a socialite in an emerald gown smirked as she sipped her champagne. "I'd bet she's dying inside right now." Olivia heard every word. Her entire body was rigid, her fingers clenched tightly around the napkin in her lap. This wasn't happening. This was her night, her perfect fairy tale wedding, where she was supposed to be the center of admiration and envy. Instead, she was the subject of ridicule. Her mind raced for a way to regain control, to rewrite the narrative before it spiraled any further. She turned to William, forcing a bright but brittle smile, as if this were all just a misunderstanding. "William, I didn't know." Her voice was shaky, desperate to sound casual. "You never told me." William's face was unreadable, his hazel eyes studying her carefully. But there was something different in them now, something distant. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet but firm. "You never asked." The words hit her harder than she expected. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She hadn't asked. Not once in all their time together had she inquired about his family's background, his parents' work, his sister's ambitions. She had assumed. Assumed they were ordinary. Assumed they were beneath her. Assumed they didn't matter. And now? Now she realized her mistake. A fresh wave of murmurs rippled through the room as guests watched the interaction unfold, some with pity, others with amusement. Olivia felt the weight of their stares pressing down on her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the one with the upper hand. She was the one being judged. William stood near the edge of the ballroom, his hands clenched at his sides, his thoughts a storm raging inside him. The laughter, the whispers, Olivia's desperate attempt to salvage her pride, it all swirled in his mind, colliding with memories of the woman he had once believed he would spend his life with. He had loved Olivia. Or at least he had loved the version of her he thought he knew. But tonight had stripped away the illusions. Tonight he had seen the truth. She had never respected his family. She had never even tried to understand them. To her, love had been conditional, contingent on wealth, on status, on how well he fit into her world. And worst of all, she had assumed his family was beneath her without ever bothering to see them for who they truly were. William ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. Behind him, his parents stood quietly. They had always been his foundation, his guideposts when life became uncertain. His mother's voice was gentle, steady. "William, I know you love her. But love isn't enough if there's no respect." His father nodded. "A marriage is about more than just appearances, son. We don't choose a wife simply because she's beautiful." William swallowed hard. His father's words struck deep. For months, he had ignored the nagging doubts, convincing himself that Olivia would change, that her love for him would soften the sharp edges of her arrogance. But tonight had proven otherwise. He took a deep breath, turned, and walked back toward the center of the ballroom. The room fell into silence as guests realized what was happening. All eyes turned to him. At the head table, Olivia sat frozen, her fingers wrapped tightly around her champagne flute. The moment William's gaze locked onto hers, her breath caught in her throat. He stepped closer. The weight of the moment pressed down on them both. Then, his voice, quiet but unwavering, cut through the silence. "Olivia," he said, "I can't marry someone who doesn't respect my family." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Olivia's face drained of color. For the first time tonight, she had nothing to say. A hush fell over the grand ballroom. The air was thick with disbelief, tension crackling like an unspoken storm. For a long moment, Olivia simply stared at William, her vision blurring as his words echoed in her head. "I can't marry someone who doesn't respect my family." The reality of it struck her like ice water. Her hands trembled as she reached for him, her voice breaking. "William, please, let's talk about this." But he had already made up his mind. His face was calm, but there was no anger, just disappointment. A quiet, final kind of disappointment that told her there was nothing left to say. William turned away. Her breath hitched as he stepped back, away from the altar, away from the future they had once planned together. "William," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But he didn't stop. Margaret and Thomas stood gracefully, their dignified presence making a statement without words. Lily shot one last unreadable glance toward Olivia before following her parents. The Carter family walked out of the grand ballroom, their heads held high, leaving Olivia standing there, alone, in front of hundreds of guests, drowning in her own humiliation. The murmurs started again, some hushed, some bold. She brought this on herself. "Can't believe she let him slip away." Well, that's a first. The groom walking away from her. Olivia felt the weight of every pair of eyes in the room. The glittering chandeliers, the towering floral arrangements, the gold-trimmed wedding invitations. It all suddenly felt so meaningless. Her perfect wedding had turned into a spectacle. And worst of all, she had no one to blame but herself. 1 year later. The world hadn't ended that night, but for a long time it had felt like it had. For months after the wedding that never was, Olivia had been the center of gossip in high society. She had avoided every gala, every luncheon. every event where whispers and knowing smirks followed her like shadows. But as the months passed, something inside her began to shift. For the first time in her life, Olivia was forced to look inward, to ask herself why William had walked away, why it had taken her losing everything to realize that wealth and status weren't the only things that mattered. She started volunteering, small at first, at charity events her mother used to force her to attend, but this time she actually paid attention. She started listening. She donated to causes without seeking recognition. She spent time in underprivileged schools, watching children's eyes light up as they received books, food, and opportunities they never had before. She learned. She grew. And in the quiet moments, when she was alone with her thoughts, she still thought of William. She wondered if he was happy, if he ever thought of her. And then, one crisp autumn afternoon, she saw him again. She had been walking through a quiet park, the golden leaves crunching beneath her designer boots, when she spotted him sitting at an outdoor cafe. Her breath caught. William. But he wasn't alone. A woman sat across from him, laughing at something he had said. She was effortlessly beautiful, but not in the way Olivia had once defined beauty. There was warmth in her eyes, kindness in the way she leaned toward him, as if truly listening. And William. He looked happy. Not just content, but truly happy. Olivia stood there for a long moment, unseen, watching the man she had once been ready to spend her life with. Then she smiled softly to herself. For the first time, she didn't feel resentment, didn't feel regret, only gratitude. Because losing William had been the wake-up call she never knew she needed. And though she had lost him, she had found something greater, herself. As she turned and walked away, she knew one thing for certain. Money could buy luxury, status, even admiration. But it could never buy true love and respect. Life has a way of teaching us lessons in the most unexpected ways. Olivia thought she had everything, wealth, status, a picture-perfect wedding. But in the end, none of it mattered when she lost the one thing that was truly priceless, love built on respect. William walked away, not because he didn't love Olivia, but because love without respect isn't enough. And in losing him, Olivia gained something she had never valued before, a deeper understanding of herself and the world around her. Sometimes life doesn't give us what we want. It gives us what we need to grow. What do you think? Did Olivia deserve a second chance? Or was William right to walk away? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love soul-stirring stories like this, stories of love, loss, redemption, and the power of human connection, make sure to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories and turn on notifications. We have plenty more emotional and inspiring tales coming your way. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.